Greetings and welcome. This is Australia-China Media Watch's first episode, focusing on the Lowy Institute and in particular, its interpreter website. The reason why I decided to expand the realm of my research was to look beyond the traditional media outlet to see if think tanks are actively participating in the construction of a negative and repulsive China. A little bit of history about the Lowy Institute according to their own website. And this is what it says. The Lowy Institute is an independent, non-partisan international policy think tank located in Sydney, Australia. It is, according to their website, Australia's leading think tank, providing high-quality research and distinctive perspectives on the international trends shaping Australia and the world. For a little bit of its history, the Lowy Institute was founded in April 2003 by Frank Lowy AC, one of Australia's leading businessmen. Mr. Lowy had written, "In 2002, as the 50th anniversary of my arrival in Australia approached, I began to consider what philanthropic gesture might make to the country in return for the half-century of opportunity that Australia had given me. Inspired by the tradition, so well established in America, of individuals establishing think tanks to generate and disseminate public policy proposals, my family and I settled on the idea of supporting the creation of an international policy institute in Australia. In part, this reflected my own preoccupations. My exposure to international political and business leaders and world issues had helped foster a strong interest in global affairs. I wanted my fellow Australians to better understand the myriad global forces that are increasingly shaping their lives, especially as technology has relieved the tyranny of distance under which Australia has always labored. The idea of establishing an institute also reflected a frustration that, despite Australia's distinguished service on the world stage in many areas, its role was not often recognized. As I traveled the world, reading the leading international newspapers of the day, it seemed that the only references to Australia were to shark attacks, bushfires, or tennis players. Establishing the Lowy Institute for International Policy was an attempt to broaden this narrative. In this respect, the goal of the Lowy Institute was to give Australia a bigger voice on the issues that matter in global affairs. But it's also true that you're more likely to be heard if you have something new, insightful, or interesting to say. Ultimately, therefore, the Lowy Institute represents an investment in ideas. We'll take a look at the Lowy Institute's Wikipedia entry. In the opening paragraph, it reads, "The Lowy Institute is an independent think tank founded in 2003 by Frank Lowy to conduct original policy-relevant research about international, political, strategic and economic issues from an Australian perspective. It is based in Sydney, New South Wales, Australia." While the Institute has alternatively been described as quote-unquote neoliberal, quote-unquote center-right-leaning, or quote-unquote reactionary, officially, its research and analysis aim to be non-partisan, and its active program of conferences, seminars, and other events are designed to inform and deepen the debate about international policy in Australia and to help shape the broader international discussion of these issues. In terms of its funding, it says here, Lowy was a veteran of the 1947 to 1949 Palestine War. He is of Australian-Israeli heritage, being Slovakian-born, and some of the details about its revenue and expenses can be found in this paragraph. The Institute registered with the Australian Charities and Not-for-Profits Commission in 2012 as the Lowy Institute for International Policy, and by 2019 was reporting $12 million in revenues, including over $2 million from government and over $9 million in expenses. Let's take a closer look to verify the legitimacy of this claim. So it looks like a link has been provided to the Australian Charities and Not-for-Profits Commission, but that link is no longer working. But if I were to click on the link provided up there, yep, being relatively transparent from first glance, financial overview, total income, $26 million. And this dates to, let's have a look, last reported 21st of December 2021. Summary of activities to facilitate the advancement of Australia internationally by the creation, generation and promulgation of informed and creative ideas, research and opinion on economic and foreign policy issues, international affairs and matters of national importance, amongst other things. Some of the charity programs involved the North Asia Program, the Power and Diplomacy Program, the International Economics Program, the International Security Program, the Public Opinion and Foreign Policy Program, the West Asia Program, as well as the Pacific Island Program. If we take a closer look at its financial breakdown, it looks like 13.04% of its gross income is derived from government grants. 82.14% of its gross income arrives from donations and bequests. 4.78% of its income arrives from goods or services, and 0.04% from income investments. The Australian business number, the ABN, is provided over here, 40102792174. It looks like its annual reports are provided, as well as a key list of responsible persons and some historical data. In terms of its Facebook presence, it has 29,000 likes with 30,000 odd plus followers. It also has a LinkedIn profile, and via LinkedIn it looks like it has 16,220 followers. And from its LinkedIn description, the Lowy Institute is a leading global think tank that looks at the world from Australia's perspective. We'll take a closer look at its About Us description. The Lowy Institute is an independent international policy think tank based in Sydney. Its objective is to generate new ideas and dialogue on international developments and Australia's role in the world. Its mandate is broad. It ranges across all dimensions of the international policy debate in Australia, economic, political and strategic, and it is not limited to a particular region. With that said, I think we're ready to unpack articles from the Lowy Institute's The Interpreter, starting from Monday, 31st of January, running through to Sunday, the 6th of February. So during the course of this week, there were 3 articles, and let's begin unpacking the first one. This was written by Henry Storey, and the headline, China's Common Prosperity is a Catch-22. Once again, China's common prosperity is a Catch-22 with the subheader, a phenomenal housing glut in the Chinese market is eroding the country's productivity and economic future. The article comes with an accompanying image with the following captions: China Evergrande's Group's life in Venice real estate and tourism development in Qidong, Jiangsu province, 21st of September, captured by Qilai Shen, apologies for that, via Bloomberg, via Getty Images. The opening paragraph of this article states, the events of the latter half of 2021 show that Beijing is willing to tolerate significant economic pain to deleverage its property sector. For the Chinese Communist Party, the financial and social risks posed by the current state of the real estate sector are existential. At the end of the second quarter of 2021, the sector's official outstanding debts were approximately $5 trillion, a third of China's GDP. Several creative off-the-books capital-raising techniques employed by property developer Evergrande and others mean that this figure is likely significantly higher. Banks are heavily exposed, with property comprising 27% of China's total lending. As I further unpack the article, I'd like to take a closer look at the citations and references, and it looks like the author is drawing from Bloomberg. We'll have a look at this one. So several creative off-the-books capital, drawing its citation from Asia Financial. I'm really curious to see if there are any non-Western references in play. And it looks like Asia Financial is housed in Hong Kong. So, very promising. Some balance. Let's keep unpacking the article. And let's have a look. That's worth approximately $5 trillion. And this one comes from Reuters. So 2 Western references so far and 1 from Hong Kong. We'll unpack a few more with the following paragraph. Is exemplified by the absurdity of there being up to 90 million uninhabited apartments in China. That's interesting. 90 million uninhabited apartments in China. Where did that come from? Did that come from Reuters as well? Hang on for a second. This one comes in from news.com.au. Let's keep sampling the citations. As we move along, so up to 90 million uninhabited apartments in China, the property sector is an anathema to what President Xi Jinping calls high-quality development. Okay. This is an interesting resource. 内参.org. 内参. And that citation would have come from qstheory.现求是. So pretty positive so far. There's a fair amount of balance in the reporting. Okay, we'll keep going. Both are important secondary elements of its overall common prosperity agenda. Research from both the United States and China, looks like these 2 articles are from the Wall Street Journal, backs Xi, showing that skewed capital allocation stemming from rising housing prices correlates to a reduction in total factor productivity. Above all, with housing costs up to 55 times the average annual wage in Tier 1 cities, it is the prohibitive price of real estate that's forced Beijing to finally get serious on housing reform. House prices are intimately tied to China's demographic crisis, which saw the country register a birth rate of just 0.75% last year. The abolition of the one-child policy makes little difference if couples can't afford housing. However, none of these legitimate and urgent impetuses for reform negate the sheer extent of China's economic reliance on property. At around 30% of GDP, China's property sector comprises a far higher share of economic activity than was ever the case in pre-bubble Europe, the United States, or Japan. Crucially, real estate accounts for more than 70% of China's household wealth, compared to 35% in the United States. Land sales also account for a third of local government revenue, and owing to reforms implemented in 1994, the social safety net and public services are mostly the responsibility of local governments, even though Beijing receives the lion's share of revenue. As a result, sales of land held along by a booming property market have served as a vital income source for otherwise cash-strapped local governments. Though China's social safety net, including unemployment benefits, that reference coming in from The Economist, pensions and healthcare support is paltry. This reference coming in from Hong Kong. As China rapidly ages, it is becoming ever more expensive. The pension system, for example, is running at a deficit of approximately 40%, with that citation coming in from Nikkei.com. Outside of China's affluent coastal region and Tier 1 cities, the quality of education also leaves much to be desired. From supsubchina.com, even in wealthier cities, access is an issue, with Shenzhen still considering joining a small exclusive club of Chinese cities offering 12 free years of education. That citation coming in from the South China Morning Post. All of this is of profound importance to China's common prosperity drive, which at its core is about improving the lot of China's lower and middle classes. Strengthening China's social safety net and basic public services is an efficient way to support upwards mobility, and is exactly what Xi has called for. Yet it is difficult to see how, under China's current fiscal arrangements, common prosperity can't be paid for without a strong property sector. The property slowdown has only compounded the declining fiscal health of local governments, which was already in decidedly poor shape, according to Caixin Global, before the real estate downturn. Across 2021, land sales revenue fell in 23 of 29 provinces where data was available, according to Caixin Global, and by 20% or more in 13 provinces. Adding insult to injury is the fact that in numerous cases involving Evergrande, local governments have been forced to pick up the tab, according to the Financial Times, by paying contractors to ensure that promised homes are actually built. Evident signs of distress include reports of 25 to 30% pay cuts for public officials, and that's according to Nikkei, and the State Council's castigation, according to the Chinese government's website, gov.cn, of local officials in Bazhou for imposing arbitrary fines to make up for revenue shortfalls. Perhaps the most extraordinary spectacle so far has been the increasing use of off-the-books financing vehicles controlled by the local authorities to effectively purchase their own land rights. Proposed solutions capable of deflating the property sector whilst maintaining local government balance sheets are not without trade-offs. Xi's proposed property tax will theoretically make housing more affordable while giving local governments a sustainable source of revenue. Even this modest proposal, which would be in any case insufficient to underwrite an enhanced public services and welfare rollout, was scaled down, according to the Wall Street Journal, and delayed, according to Bloomberg. The huge proportion of household wealth, including that of party members, according to the Wall Street Journal, parked in property was central to the resistance to this proposal. It is thus unsurprising that despite the distress sweeping the property industry, state intervention has ensured that housing prices have only fallen marginally, according to The Guardian. Though exorbitant housing costs are antithetical to the very notion of common prosperity, they nonetheless underline much of the household wealth that Xi's vision seeks to bolster. This dilemma is by no means wholly unique to China. However, unlike most OECD counterparts, Beijing must simultaneously deal with the added complicating variables, according to Caixin Global, of far poorer households and less developed safety nets. Absent innovative, creative, and inevitably politically unpopular policy, according to Caixin Global, solutions The danger is that China will have to choose between competing elements of the much vaunted common prosperity agenda. At this point, I'm uncertain if the othering offensive is in play. In this instance, the construction of a negative and repulsive China, there seems to be an attempt at balance in terms of where the citations and references are coming from. I will have to revisit this during my analyses to determine if this is a tick in the box, whether the interpreter is part of the othering offensive, painting China as negative and repulsive. We'll move along to the next article for the week. The next article is published on the 2nd of February. And it is entitled How China Views, quote-unquote, Strategic Competition with the United States by the authors Michael Clarke and Matthew Sussex. The subheader, Contrasting Official Readouts of the Recent Biden-Xi Summit, offer an insight in Beijing's attitudes on world order. The article comes with an accompanying photograph with the captions, A large outdoor screen in Beijing displays United States President Joe Biden on the left and China's President Xi Jinping during their virtual summit in November. Image courtesy of Getty Images. The opening paragraph of the article reads, while strategic competition, quote-unquote, between China and the United States is now regularly presented as a given. This is a citation from the AFR. What is missing from much of this discussion is a focus on Chinese attitudes, both official and unofficial. In both Washington and Canberra, and the article is drawing references from theatlantic.com as well as the Sydney Morning Herald. The prevailing view is that tension with the United States is a consequence of both China's growing material power and its authoritarianism. Chinese perspectives, by contrast, emphasize that it is American refusal to acknowledge China's status and legitimacy as a great power that drives the increasingly fractious relationship. Examination of the White House and Chinese readouts of the Biden-Xi virtual summit of 16th of November 2021 readily reveals this divergence of views. For the Biden administration, its stated desire, according to the whitehouse.gov website, to work with Beijing to address shared interests in combating climate change and, quote-unquote, managing strategic risks in the bilateral relationship was balanced against a long list of concerns from ongoing trade disputes, human rights abuses in Xinjiang, Tibet and Hong Kong, and Chinese coercion of Taiwan. These concerns, the Biden team noted, were driven by the administration's commitment to stand up for its interests and values and ensure the rules of the road for the 21st century advance an international system that is free, open, and fair. Beijing's presentation of the meeting, this is according to the website news.cn, shared some commonalities with the White House version. Let's take a closer look at this resource. News.cn, which is a Xinhua website. Commonalities with the White House version, for example, interest in climate change and in establishing guardrails to avoid intensification of disagreement, but also revealed the fundamentally different manner in which Beijing perceives the causes of tensions. Three issues in particular stand out: status, conceptions of international order, and assessments of US intentions. The Chinese readout repeatedly emphasized the fundamental equality of the status and role of both parties as global leaders. The opening paragraph, for instance, asserts that as the world's top two economies and permanent members of the UN Security Council, Beijing and Washington should strengthen communication and cooperation, not only for the benefit of their own citizens, but to also shoulder our due international responsibilities. The Chinese readout also disputes the implication in the US version that it is China's growing power and its desire to spread the Chinese model that is at the root of tensions. Here, Beijing notes that whilst China's development is an inevitable historical trend, it maintains that it has no intention of selling its own path to the world, but would encourage others to find a path of development that suits their own national conditions. With respect to international order, the Chinese readout contrasted what it claims to be the US preference for interfering in the internal affairs of other countries through human rights issues, with an approach Beijing claims to favor to safeguard an international order based on international law and basic norms of international relations based on the purposes and principles of the US Charter, or the UN Charter, apologies. Most pointedly, however, the Chinese version also attributed to President Joe Biden the statement that the US does not seek to change China's systems of governance, does not seek to counter China through alliances, and has no intention to have conflict with China, and remained devoted to pursuing the long-standing One China policy. This did not appear in the White House version, and is indicative of Beijing's core objectives. This official view, unsurprisingly, has found expression in some Chinese analysts' assessments of the Biden-Xi summit, and this comes from ChinaUSFocus.com, and the future of Sino-US relations, where the US is framed as a declining hegemon, lashing out and attacking China on its core interests in order to constrain its rise. As one analyst puts it, having failed to win the trade war, the United States is now maliciously playing the Taiwan card to interrupt China's peaceful rise through a war. Other Chinese observers lay the blame on American domestic politics, claiming the hyper-partisan divisions of the Trump years have shattered American democracy and international credibility, prompting Biden to attempt to display that the US still has some strength, when in fact it is a weak government. Some have suggested domestic weakness could play to China's advantage, as Biden has probably figured out by now that he's unlikely to be re-elected, and that coming to some arrangement with China would burnish his legacy, while still others claim time is on China's side, as expended resources and costs will overwhelm the US itself. Both America and China therefore clearly understand and frame their relationship as competitive, but each party understands the causes of this very differently. For the United States, competition is driven by China's challenge to American power and leadership, and its desire to change the international order. For Beijing, competition stems from American hegemonic pretensions during its inevitable decline. Recognizing the different calculus from both Washington and Beijing will be necessary for other states to successfully navigate strategic competition. For instance, the Biden administration's focus on strengthening American military power is a mixed blessing for allies such as Australia. Strategic competition has encouraged initiatives such as AUKUS, which promise to strengthen Australian capabilities and contribute to US deterrence efforts in Asia. Yet, the goal of revitalizing American power may risk neglecting the international order, security, and economic architecture. The disjuncture between the American assertions that it would not leave Australia alone on the field in the face of Chinese economic sanctions, and the reality, according to Australia-China-Relations.org, of American economic recoupling with China is an important data point here. Moreover, recognizing that China's current posture is framed by its belief that a declining US is attempting to sabotage it, makes it inevitable that Beijing will also perceive US allies as being complicit in that objective. A longer study of this by the authors was also recently published in World Politics Review. And this is where it is accessible. We'll move along to the final article for the week, running from Monday, the 31st of January to Sunday, 6th of February. This next article has the headline, Olympics, not the only games this year, by the author J.J. Rose. The subheader, Beijing boycotts are just the latest in a long line of sports and politics match plays. The article comes with an accompanying graphic with the captions, a conversation between American and Chinese table tennis players led to US President Richard Nixon visiting China in 1972. The opening paragraph reads, in 1971, two table tennis players, American Glenn Cowan and Zhuang Zedong from China, met on a tournament bus on the way to the World Championships in Nagoya, Japan. The chance meeting between two athletes at a time when their respective countries were enduring a distant and icy relationship set off a series of events that led to US President Richard Nixon visiting communist China in 1972, the first incumbent to do so, and began a thaw that led to both countries becoming their respective top trading partners. So ping pong diplomacy, this is a citation from the PBS.org. The doctrine established by that meeting in Japan exemplified the political power in the simple act of sporting competition between people and between countries. These days, it seems things aren't so simple. As the Beijing Winter Olympics begin this week, a number of major nations are enacting a diplomatic boycott of the games, and this is a citation coming in from Forbes.com. In December, Australia announced it was joining the soft protest, according to abc.net.au, stating that it will not send any diplomatic or state representatives to the event, although athletes will attend in protest against China's poor human rights record. Clearly, some among the political and bureaucratic class may be disappointed that the Olympic gravy train won't be stopping by this time round. But outside of such disgruntlement, their move is unlikely to have much impact. In truth, while China's many human rights problems have been highlighted as the main reason for the boycott, it can be said that a secondary target is the Olympic movement itself. The citation coming in from the usatoday.com website. Its monastic stance on political issues is, in this era of choosing sides, cancel culture and being woke, out of step and a little bewildering. For many years, sports bodies have ducked and weaved around political contexts. The old line is that sport and politics don't mix, quote unquote. That might have been true decades ago, in parentheses, might, but examples of sport being used as a political tool have matured enough in recent years, and this coming in from an academic database, a research article entitled Sport in Times of Turmoil, Political Uses of Sport in Global Crises, including in SportsMat Australia, and this coming in from the dfat.gov.au website, to confirm that it is certainly not the case now. There is another photograph that accompanies the article, and its headline reads, Richard Nixon was the first incumbent US president to visit communist China. Nixon in a center with Premier Zhou Enlai to the left and Shanghai Communist Party leader Zhang Chunqiao, February 1972. Image courtesy of Getty Images. The next paragraph reads, after Nixon's sport-inspired visit to China in 1972, the value of sport was highlighted. By 1980, it had become sharpened to become an effective political tool. Then, the US boycotted the Olympics in the USSR, using the hook of the Soviets' invasion of Afghanistan, and other countries such as Australia under the Fraser government felt obliged to rally behind them. Citation coming in from the Olympics.com website, although in Australia's case, in a lesser fashion. The United States' actions were mirrored in 1984 when the Los Angeles Games went ahead without the boycotting Soviets and the Soviet bloc. The Olympics have been the most commonly used event for political point scoring. Let's not forget what may have been the ultimate political abuse of the sport: the kidnapping and murder of 9 Israeli athletes, reference coming in from news.bbc.co.uk, at the 1972 Munich Games. As sport has grown, the reach and influence of big moments like the Olympics have motivated a range of piggybacking actions. The world's most popular game, football, soccer to some, has become increasingly hot in political terms. The astronomical amount of money the game now attracts and generates, and its vast number of followers, citation coming in from allianz.com, means it can be readily enlisted to score goals off the pitch. Not since the 1978 World Cup in Junta-led Argentina, that reference coming in from sites.duke.edu, has a tournament been more politically charged than this year's FIFA World Cup in Qatar, scheduled to kick off in November. In the last year, calls have been growing, this citation coming in from business-humanrights.org, for countries to boycott the event even if their teams qualify. Norway, Germany and Denmark are amongst those that have seen concerted campaigns to pull the national teams out of Qatar, largely in protest over human rights in the Gulf states. Australian Socceroo players, meanwhile, even as the team still fights to qualify, have been openly questioning, reference coming in from the Sydney Morning Herald's website, whether some form of action might be appropriate. As with the Olympic boycott, the World Cup issue is a shot at FIFA's inability to read the room and at its awarding the rights to stage the event in Qatar in the first place. With all these political issues folding into the action on the sporting field, it seems that sport as a political force has reasserted itself. The economic clout, the fan base, and influence of modern professional sport means it has become the ultimate political football, and any denial of its politicization seems redundant. Beijing will be its next test. After that, Qatar. This concludes our look at articles from the Lowy Institute's Interpreter involving China. Please be sure to tune in next week for episode 2 of the Australia-China Media Watch, looking specifically at the Lowy Institute's construction of China. Thank you so much for your time, and please lend your support through subscribing. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is the ACMW signing out for the week.